The archives of the Concordium spoke of humans as myths, nothing more than tales told to younglings, stories of a species that had mastered the stars before vanishing without a trace. Tales to entertain, not history to be studied. Researcher Juwu sat alone in the dim light of the xenorchaeology lab, staring at the artifact. The metal cylinder fit perfectly in his four-fingered hand, its surface etched with symbols unlike any known language in the Concordium database. Unlike his colleagues, he couldn't dismiss what he found. Elder Doyun will deny it again, he muttered, scanning the clearly human-made device. The lab hummed quietly around him. Screens displayed analysis results that contradicted everything the Council taught about galactic history. The metal's composition included elements in combinations that no known species had ever created. The power source, though dormant, contained energy signatures that matched no known technology. Juwu's skin, normally a calm blue, had darkened with frustration. For 3 cycles, he had brought evidence to the elders. For 3 cycles, they had dismissed his findings as misinterpretations or wishful thinking. Humans are bedtime stories, Researcher Juwu, Elder Doyun had said last time, her tone gentle but firm. Next you'll claim the Star Eaters are real as well. The lab door slid open with a soft hiss. His assistant Minji entered, her steps quick and her breathing fast. Her eye membranes blinked rapidly, a sign of anxiety among their kind. Another signal detected at the edge of our space, she said, placing a data crystal on his workstation. The Council is concerned. Juwu inserted the crystal into his console. The holographic display showed a section of space near the abandoned Sector 7. Energy readings pulsed across the screen, organized, patterned, undeniably artificial. This is the 3rd signal this month, he said, enhancing the display, each one closer than the last. Minji leaned closer. The Council believes it may be the Dorvan Collective testing new communication technology. The Dorvans? Juwu laughed without humor. Their ships can barely reach their own colony worlds. These signals are coming from deep space. He manipulated the display, overlaying the new readings with data from his artifact. The patterns aligned perfectly. They should be concerned, Juwu replied, not looking up. The legends are returning. Minji's skin paled. You can't truly believe. I've studied every text, every fragment of evidence for 20 years, Juwu interrupted. The so-called myths speak of a species that built wonders beyond our understanding, who fought wars that shaped galaxies, who vanished at the height of their power. He lifted the artifact. This device is real. The signals are real. What if the humans are real too? A notification chimed on Minji's personal communicator. She checked it, her expression changing to alarm. The Science Council requests your immediate presence, she said. Elder Doyun specifically asked for you. Juwu carefully placed the artifact in a secure container. Perhaps they're finally ready to listen. The corridors of the Central Science Facility were unusually busy. Researchers hurried between departments, speaking in hushed tones. Something had changed in the usually calm atmosphere of the facility. When they reached the council chamber, Juwu was surprised to see not just the Science Council, but representatives from the military command as well. Elder Doyun sat at the center, her usually composed features tense. Researcher Juwu, she said when he entered, show us your findings again. Confused but hopeful, Juwu connected his data crystal to the main display. The chamber darkened as images of his artifact appeared, alongside analysis of the recent signals. For years, I've argued that humans weren't myths, he began. The evidence. New information has come to light, Elder Doyun interrupted. 20 minutes ago, our long-range sensors detected something entering our space. She nodded to a military officer who activated a separate display. The image showed darkness at first, then tiny points of light, hundreds of them, moving in formation. Ships, Juwu whispered. An entire fleet, the officer confirmed, of unknown design and origin. Elder Doyun turned to Juwu, her expression grave. The signals were attempts at communication. They've sent a message in an ancient language. Our systems took time to translate it. The final display showed simple text. We are the United Earth Federation. Humanity has returned. Prepare for contact. Jiwoo looked from the message to his artifact, then back to the council. The legends are real, he said softly, and they've come home. Admiral Kyung-go stood motionless on the command deck of the Concordium Defense Station Aegis, his 4 eyes fixed on the main view screen. His outer hands were clasped behind his back, while his primary hands rested on the command console. Around him, the crew worked in tense silence. Another 12 vessels have appeared, Admiral, reported the sensor officer. That brings the total to 537. The unknown fleet had materialized near Outpost 7 3 hours ago. At first, just a few vessels, then dozens, now hundreds, perhaps thousands. They maintained perfect formation, neither advancing nor retreating. Kyung-ho had lived through 3 border conflicts and 1 full-scale war in his 60 years of service. Never had he seen such discipline in a fleet. Never had he felt such unease. Magnify Section 4, he ordered. The screen shifted to show one of the larger vessels. Its design was unlike anything in Concordium records, sleek and angular with strange protrusions that might be weapons or sensors. No obvious engine exhausts were visible, yet the ships had appeared with impossible speed. Are they matching any known configurations? Kyung-ho asked. Strategic Officer Bina consulted her screen. No matches in our database, Admiral. However, she hesitated. Speak freely, officer. The design elements bear striking similarities to the artifacts researcher Jiwoo has been studying. The ones he claims are of human origin. A murmur spread across the command deck. The mention of humans, creatures of legend, brought both fear and disbelief. Send the greeting protocols, Kyung-go ordered, his voice betraying none of his inner turmoil. Lieutenant Yoonji, the communications officer, initiated the standard first contact sequence, a series of mathematical equations and simple visuals designed to establish basic understanding across language barriers. The Concordium had used these protocols only twice in the last century, both times with primitive species just beginning interstellar travel. Minutes passed. The unknown fleet remained silent. No response, Lieutenant Yoonji reported, her voice steady despite her fear. The skin around her neck had paled to a light blue, a biological response to stress their species couldn't control. Repeat on all frequencies, Kyung-go ordered. Add the emergency diplomatic codes. As Yoonji worked, Kyung-ho opened a secure channel to Concordium Central Command. The situation remains unchanged, he reported. We are attempting communication, but... Admiral. Yoonji interrupted, something she would never do under normal circumstances. We're receiving a transmission. The command center fell silent as the main screen flickered. The image of the alien fleet vanished, replaced by a face. The being had 2 eyes, not 4, skin without scales, hair on the top of its head, a mouth with flat teeth. It was unmistakably what ancient texts described as human. This is Fleet Commander Han of the United Earth Federation. After 5 centuries, humanity has returned to known space. The voice was translated by the ship's computers, but even in translation, it carried authority and absolute confidence. Kyung-ho found himself momentarily unable to speak. In his youth, he had read the forbidden stories of humanity, tales of a species that had once dominated the stars before vanishing. Stories the Council insisted were myths. This is Admiral Kyung-ho of the Concordium Defense Force, he finally responded. Your presence has caused considerable concern. Our records contain no verified information about your species. Commander Han's expression remained neutral. That is unsurprising, Admiral. We withdrew from this region of space long before your civilization achieved starflight. For what purpose have you returned? Kyung-ho asked, aware that every word of this exchange was being transmitted to Central Command. We monitored your development from afar. Your civilization has grown impressively. Han paused. But you are not prepared for what approaches. We have returned to help you survive it. Before Kyung-ho could ask what this meant, another officer rushed onto the command deck. Admiral, urgent news from the outer systems, she said, extending a datapad. Outpost 12 has gone silent. Last transmission reported unknown biological entities unlike anything we've encountered. As Kyung-ho read the report, Commander Han spoke again. I see you've received word of the first incursion. We were too late to save that outpost. We need not be too late for the rest of your worlds. Kyung-ho looked up at the human's face on the screen, understanding dawning. You didn't come back for us. No, Han agreed. We came back because of what follows us. And now it follows you too. The Grand Council chamber of the Concordium had never hosted beings like these before. 3 humans sat across from the 7 council members, their forms strange yet eerily familiar. They had 2 arms instead of 4, their skin smooth instead of scaled, and they walked differently. Yet their eyes held intelligence that matched any counselor's gaze. The chamber itself, a marvel of Concordium architecture with its soaring crystal ceiling and living light formations, seemed diminished by the presence of these visitors. The humans appeared unimpressed, as if they had seen greater wonders. Behind the counselors stood various experts and assistants, including researcher Ju and his assistant Minji. After years of being mocked for his theories about human existence, Ju could barely contain his excitement. Minji noticed his skin had turned an almost glowing shade of blue, a sign of intense emotion among their kind. You abandoned your worlds, said Counselor Chuno, staring at the human delegation. His voice carried accusation, though he tried to mask it. The historical sites we discovered on planets throughout our territory, they were yours, then discarded. The human at the center, Ambassador Jin, smiled patiently. Unlike her military companions who sat rigidly in their seats, she had a relaxed posture. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back, revealing a face lined with age yet animated with intelligence. We retreated to survive, she replied. The catastrophe that struck our worlds was beyond our technology then. What catastrophe could force an entire species to vanish? Asked Counselor Taewon. Our scientists have found no evidence of natural disaster on these worlds. Ambassador Jian exchanged glances with her companions before answering. It wasn't natural. We call them the Void Eaters. You will likely face them soon. A murmur ran through the chamber. The same threat Admiral Kyung-ho had reported from the fleet encounter. You speak of the same danger your military commander mentioned. Counselor Chunho noted. Yet you provide no proof. Why should we believe this isn't merely justification for your return? Perhaps even a pretext for conquest. Before Jan could answer, Minji stepped forward from behind the council table. As a junior researcher, this breach of protocol was shocking. Ju tried to pull her back, but she evaded his grasp. The monoliths of Sector 9, those were yours? She asked, her voice clear despite her obvious nervousness. The humans all turned to look at her. Ambassador Jen's expression changed from diplomatic neutrality to genuine interest. Yes, Jan confirmed. What you call ancient wonders, we call our history. We've been watching from the shadows, waiting until we were needed again. Minji pulled out a small device and projected an image between them, a massive black structure rising from the surface of a distant world. The monolith of Takaru, the most famous of the unexplained ancient structures. I studied these for years, Minji explained. They're not monuments. They're functional. They emit pulses of unknown energy every 73 days, precisely. The human military officer to John's right leaned forward. The Deep Watch Network. It's still operational after all this time. He sounded surprised. It's a sensor array, Ambassador Jian explained, designed to detect void movement across vast distances. If your scientists have recorded increased pulse activity recently, that confirms our worst fears. Counselor Junho looked at Minji. Is this true? Minji nodded. The pulses increased in frequency 3 months ago. Now they occur every 2 days. Ju stepped forward to stand beside his assistant. We assumed it was a malfunction in our monitoring equipment. We were wrong. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The evidence supporting the humans' claims was coming from the Concordium's own research. Ambassador Jian stood, her full height slightly less than the Concordium members, but her presence somehow filling the room. 5 centuries ago, we faced extinction. We weren't ready. We retreated to the far side of the galaxy, rebuilding, preparing. We left behind warnings and watchers. She gestured to the image of the monolith. When these began signaling, we knew it was time to return. Not for conquest, for alliance. "Why should we trust you?" asked Counselor Chunno, though his tone had softened. "Because the alternative is facing the void alone," Jan replied simply. "And no species has ever survived that." From the back of the chamber, a new voice spoke. Admiral Kyungo had entered quietly during the exchange. "Outposts 12 through 15 have gone silent," he announced. "The last transmissions match exactly what the humans described. The Void Eaters have arrived at our borders." Ambassador Jian nodded grimly. "Then we have much less time than I hoped. The lost children of Earth have returned, counselors. The question is, will you accept our help?" Commander Han stood in the center of the Concordium war room, his uniform crisp despite the 20 hours he had been awake. Around him, the highest military and political leaders of the Concordium gathered, their scaled skin reflecting the blue glow of the holographic display. "They call themselves the Void," Commander Han explained, showing holographic images of massive bioships. "They consume everything in their path." The images rotated slowly above the central table. The Void vessels resembled nothing built by humans or the Concordium. They were organic, with pulsing veins running across dark, rough surfaces. Some stretched kilometers in length, with tendrils extending outward like hungry fingers reaching for prey. "These ships are alive?" asked Admiral Kyungo, leaning forward to study the images. "Ship, pilot, and weapon, all one organism," Han confirmed. "They don't build their technology, they grow it. They don't fuel their vessels, they feed them." Chancellor Taehyun shook his head. "These could be fabrications, computer simulations to frighten us into accepting your presence." His 4 eyes narrowed, inner eyelids blinking rapidly, a sign of suspicion among his kind. Han's expression remained unchanged, but Ambassador Jian, standing quietly at his side, stepped forward. "Chancellor, we understand your caution," she said, "but consider what you've already confirmed. The increased activity from the monoliths. The loss of contact with your outposts. Coincidences," said Taehyun, "or perhaps even your doing." From the back of the room, researcher Juwu moved closer to the table. Since the humans' arrival, he had become an unofficial liaison between the species, his years of study making him uniquely qualified. "The outpost in the Moran system was destroyed yesterday," Juwu interjected. "I've analyzed the final transmissions. The patterns match Commander Han's warning exactly." He connected his data pad to the main display. The holographic images changed to show the final moments recorded from Outpost Moran. Fuzzy images showed dark shapes approaching the station, then strange, organic tendrils punching through hull plating. The station's external cameras captured glimpses of creatures moving through the corridors. Tall, skeletal forms with too many limbs, their bodies seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. "The last transmission included this," Juwu said quietly. Audio filled the room. Screams, strange clicking sounds, and a final message. "They're inside. They're eating everything. The station, the people, even the light itself." Silence fell across the chamber as the reality sank in. The humans hadn't returned by chance. Commander Han waited a moment before continuing. "We first encountered the Void 600 years ago. They destroyed our colonies one by one. Earth itself was nearly lost." He gestured, and the hologram changed to show images of ancient battles. Human ships, primitive compared to their current fleet, facing the organic horrors of the void. We retreated, regrouped in distant sectors. We rebuilt our civilization, advanced our technology, and prepared for their inevitable return. Han continued. The monoliths you discovered were our early warning system. When they began signaling more frequently, we knew the void had found this sector again. Admiral Kyungo studied the battle footage. You defeated them before. Not defeated, Han corrected. Survived. There's a difference. Ambassador Jian added, we've learned much since then, but the void evolves. Each encounter, they adapt to our weapons, our tactics. Minji, who had been quietly analyzing data in the corner, suddenly looked up. Commander, these biological readings from the Moran attack, they're different from your historical records. Han moved to her station, examined her findings, and nodded grimly. As I feared, they've evolved again. Chancellor Tahian's skepticism had faded, replaced by growing concern. How much time do we have before a full-scale invasion? Based on their current advance rate, Han calculated, 2 months, perhaps less. And you believe we can stop them together? Taehyun asked. I believe we must try, Han replied. Humanity retreated once. There's nowhere left to run now, for any of us. The Concordium leaders exchanged glances. Admiral Kyungho was the first to speak. What do you propose, Commander? Han straightened. A joint defense initiative. Your knowledge of this sector combined with our experience fighting the void. Shared technology, integrated forces. And if we refuse? Asked Taehyun. Then we will fight alone, Ambassador Jian said simply. And when we fall, you will face them alone. Admiral Kyungho placed all 4 hands on the table, a gesture of formal decision-making in Concordium culture. I move that we accept the human proposal, he said. The threat is real, and it is coming for us all. One by one, the other leaders placed their hands on the table, until only Chancellor Taehyun remained. After a long moment, he too joined them. So be it, he said. The Concordium and humanity will face this threat together. The training facility on Concordium Defense Station Vanguard had never seen such activity. What was once a quiet military outpost had transformed into a bustling joint operations center. Yoonji walked through the massive hangar bay, dodging rush technicians and equipment transports. As communications officer from Admiral Kyungho's command staff, she had been assigned as liaison to the human military advisors. The role was challenging in ways she hadn't expected. Humans communicated differently, not just in language, but in subtle body language and unspoken assumptions. Yoonji stopped at the edge of the training area. Below 50 Concordium soldiers faced off against 10 human instructors. The Concordium troops had 4 arms instead of 2, greater physical strength, and naturally armored skin. Yet the humans moved with a speed and precision that made these advantages seem almost irrelevant. Captain Sungho, the human combat instructor, demonstrated a takedown maneuver against a Concordium soldier twice his size. The movement was fluid, using the larger fighter's momentum against him. The Concordium soldier hit the mat hard. Yoonji watched human soldiers demonstrate combat techniques to Concordium forces. Their movements were efficient, almost beautiful in their deadliness. Your species fights like it evolved for warfare, she told Captain Sungho when he finished the demonstration and climbed up to the observation deck where she stood. He shook his head. We evolved for survival. There's a difference. Sungho wiped sweat from his brow. Unlike the Concordium, humans perspired when overheated, another strange biological difference. The void doesn't fight like either of our species, he continued. They don't seek victory through superior force. They consume. Everything is food to them. Metal, energy, flesh, even information. How do you fight something like that? Yoonji asked. With adaptability, Sungho replied. The Concordium military is impressive, disciplined, well-equipped, but you train for predictable enemies. The void is anything but predictable. Across the training field, Engineers installed human shield technology on Concordium vessels. The enemy scouts had already taken 3 more systems since the formal alliance had been established. The outer colonies were being evacuated, their populations streaming toward the core worlds. Sungo pointed to a newly arrived shuttle. That's the R&D team from Earth. They'd brought prototype weapons designed specifically for the Void. The shuttle's ramp lowered, and a team of human scientists emerged, escorted by Concordium security. At their center walked a small, elderly human woman. Dr. Kim, Sungo said with obvious respect. She's been studying the Void for 60 years. If anyone can find their weakness, it's her. Yoonji followed Sungo as he went to greet the new arrivals. Dr. Kim looked frail compared to the Concordium security detail towering over her, but her eyes were sharp and missed nothing. Captain, she nodded to Sungo. I see the joint training is progressing. Yes, Doctor. This is Lieutenant Yoonji, our Concordium liaison. Dr. Kim studied Yoonji for a moment. Lieutenant, I'll need access to all data from the recent Void encounters, particularly the sensory readings from the moments before communication was lost. Of course, Yoonji replied. Admiral Kyungo has authorized full information sharing. Good, Dr. Kim said, because I've discovered something concerning about these new Void entities. She activated a portable holoprojector. Above it appeared the familiar shape of a Void bioship, but highlighted with strange energy signatures Yoonji hadn't seen before. They're adapting faster than in previous encounters, Dr. Kim explained. And they're incorporating technology from the worlds they consume. See these structures? She pointed to formations along the bioship's hull. Those are modified Concordium energy collectors. They're learning from us as they feed, Sungo said grimly. An alarm blared throughout the station. Red emergency lights bathed everything in an eerie glow. What's happening? Dr. Kim asked, remarkably calm despite the chaos erupting around them. Yoonji checked her communication device. Void scouts detected in the Helios system. That's only 2 jumps from here. Earlier than we predicted, Sungo said. We need to accelerate the weapon integration, Dr. Kim stated. The standard timeline won't work now. A nearby view screen activated, showing Admiral Kyungo. All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. First wave of Void scouts has bypassed the outer defense grid. All civilian ships are to begin evacuation procedures immediately. Yoonji felt a moment of fear before her training took over. I'll take you to the command center, she told Dr. Kim. As they hurried through the corridors, they passed a viewport. Outside, the human fleet was moving into formation alongside Concordium vessels. The once separate forces now operated as one. Will we be ready? Yoonji asked quietly. No, Dr. Kim answered honestly, but we'll adapt. That's what both our species do best. The station shuddered as it moved to battle position. The war the humanity had been preparing for over centuries had finally reached the Concordium. And despite all their preparations, Yoonji knew they were facing something beyond imagination. In the distance, strange dark shapes appeared against the starfield. The Void had arrived. The Void fleet darkened the skies above New Serenity. What had once been the jewel of the Concordium's inner colonies now stood as the final defensive line before the core worlds. The planet's orbital defense stations had been destroyed in the first wave. Now, the remaining Concordium ships formed a desperate barrier between the planet and the advancing Void armada. From the command center deep beneath New Serenity's capital city, General Hyunwoo watched the battle unfold on the strategic display. His 4 hands gripped the edges of the command table as reports of failing shields and lost vessels streamed in. Third defensive line breached, reported an officer. Fourth line forming, but vessel strength down to 30%. Where are our reinforcements from Sector 7? Hyunwoo demanded. Destroyed or scattered, came the grim reply. The Void bioships adapted to our phase cannon frequencies. They're no longer effective. 3 weeks of continuous battle had pushed the combined forces to their breaking point. The Concordium had lost over half its fleet. The human forces had fared better but were stretched thin across multiple fronts. "Where are the humans?" General Hyunwoo demanded, scanning the tactical display for the promised reinforcements from Earth Fleet Command. Commander Han assured me they would support this position. "No sign of human vessels in the system, General," replied Tactical Officer Jia. Her scaled hands moved rapidly over her console, searching all sensor bands. Last communication indicated they were engaged in the Proxima sector. A junior communications officer approached. "General, we're receiving an encrypted message from the human flagship Defender." "Put it through," Hyunwoo ordered. Commander Han's face appeared on the main screen. Despite the chaos of a command bridge visible behind him, the human officer appeared calm. "General, prepare your forces to advance on my mark," Han said without preamble. "Advance?" Hyunwoo was incredulous. "My forces are barely holding position. We can't possibly." "Trust me, General," Han interrupted. "When I give the signal, push forward with everything you have. Target these coordinates." Data streamed across a secondary screen. "These are behind the Void Fleet," Hyunwoo noted. "There's nothing there." "There will be," Han promised. "Stand by." The connection ended. Hyunwoo turned to his officers. "Prepare all remaining vessels to advance on my command," he ordered. The order was met with confused looks, but no one questioned him. The tactical display showed the Void bioships pressing forward. Their organic forms pulsed with stolen energy as they absorbed debris from destroyed ships. The largest of them, a 15-kilometer monstrosity that had once been 3 separate entities, moved toward the planet itself. 30 seconds until planetary defense shields fail, Jia reported. "Where are the humans?" Hyunwoo muttered again, this time to himself. His question was answered as 500 human ships dropped from hyperspace directly behind the Void Armada. Not at the system's edge as physics dictated was safe, but directly in the battle zone. "Impossible!" exclaimed Tactical Officer Jia. They jumped inside the gravity well. "Humans," Hyunwoo said with newfound respect, "don't seem to care about impossibilities." The human ships opened fire immediately, unleashing weapons that hadn't been seen in previous engagements. Beams of golden energy carved through the Void bioships, preventing their usual regenerative abilities. The smaller human vessels darted between the massive Void ships, planting devices that pulsed with brilliant light before detonating. "They're using quantum disruption charges," the weapons officer explained, awe in his voice. "The technology was theoretical in our research." Commander Han's voice came through the communication system again. "Now, General, push forward. All ships advance." Hyunwoo ordered. "Concentrate fire on the coordinates provided." The remaining Concordium vessels surged forward, catching the Void Fleet in a perfect pincer movement. Caught between the human fleet's advanced weapons and the Concordium's concentrated firepower, the Void bioships began to falter for the first time. On the tactical display, Hyunwoo noticed something strange. The human ships were herding the Void vessels, driving them toward a specific point in space. As the largest Void entity reached this position, Commander Han's flagship fired a single projectile. The small device attached to the Void flagship and seemed to do nothing for several seconds. Then space itself appeared to fold inward. A singularity formed, pulling the Void ships toward it with irresistible force. "What is that?" Hyunwoo asked, stunned. Jia studied her readings. "Some form of artificial gravity well. It's consuming the Void ships but leaving our vessels untouched." Across the battlefield, the same tactic was being repeated by other human vessels. One by one, the Void ships were being drawn into miniature black holes that winked out of existence moments later. All Concordium vessels maintained distance from the gravity points. Commander Han warned. "The containment fields are calibrated for Void biological signatures only." Within 20 minutes, the battle that had seemed hopeless was turning. The skies above New Serenity began to clear as the last Void ships were systematically eliminated. Han's face appeared on the command screen once more. "General, we've cleared this sector, but this was just the vanguard. Their main fleet is 8 hours behind." "How did you do this?" Hanbu asked. "The hyperspace jump alone should have destroyed your vessels." Han smiled grimly. 500 years of preparation, General. We've been fighting this enemy for generations, developing technologies specifically to counter them. Why didn't you deploy these weapons earlier?" Hyunwoo demanded. "We could have saved millions of lives." "Because we only had one chance," Han replied. "The Void adapts quickly. Now they've seen our primary weapons, we have perhaps one more engagement before they develop countermeasures." Hyunwoo understood then. The humans had been holding back, waiting for the decisive moment. "The main fleet," he said. Han nodded. "Exactly. Now we prepare for the real battle." The memorial garden was quiet as representatives from all species gathered. 1 year had passed since the final battle against the Void. What had been a hastily constructed military command center during the war had been transformed into a place of remembrance and peace. Crystal monuments caught the light of New Serenity's sun, casting rainbow patterns across the gathering. Ambassador Jian walked slowly toward the central monument. Age had bent her slightly, and the stress of the war had added more silver to her hair. Yet her eyes remained sharp and clear as she carried a small potted plant in her hands. Behind her walked Commander Han, now wearing the formal white uniform of the United Earth Federation's diplomatic corps. His military bearing remained, but the constant tension that had marked him during the war had eased. The central monument stood 12 meters tall, a spiral of metal and crystal with names etched in the writing systems of both humanity and the Concordium. Millions of names representing those lost in the conflict. Ambassador Jian placed a simple earth flower at the center monument. The blue petals seemed to glow against the white stone base. "A forget-me-not," she explained to the Concordium representatives nearby. "On Earth, we plant them to remember those who have passed." Chancellor Taehyun stepped forward. His ceremonial robes carried both the traditional markings of Concordium leadership and a new symbol, an interwoven design representing the alliance between their peoples. "A fitting tribute," he said, his translator converting his complex tonal language into human speech. "May we never forget the sacrifice required for our survival." From the crowd, a young Concordium child broke away from his parents and approached the human delegation. His scales still had the bright blue sheen of youth, and his 4 eyes blinked with curiosity rather than fear. Young Minho approached the human cautiously. "The story said humans were giants who could breathe fire," he said, staring up at John with wonder. Jan laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "We're just people like you. Different, but the same in ways that matter." She knelt down to meet the child at eye level. "Though some of us can do magic tricks, would you like to see one?" Minho nodded eagerly. Jan reached behind his ear and seemingly pulled a small coin from nowhere. The child gasped in delight, taking the offered coin with careful fingers. "Ancient Earth currency," Jan explained, "for good luck." From nearby, researcher Juwu watched the interaction with satisfaction. His life's work had been validated beyond his wildest expectations. The artifacts he had studied for decades were now understood within their proper context, a history shared between species. His assistant Minji stood beside him, now wearing the insignia of the Joint Scientific Council. "Still hard to believe sometimes, isn't it?" she asked quietly. "That humans were real all along, or that we survived the void?" Juwu replied. "Both," she said, "but mostly that we're here, planning a shared future rather than fighting for survival." Chancellor Taehyun approached them, nodding respectfully. "Your research was instrumental, Juwu. Without your persistence, we might never have accepted the truth before it was too late." "I merely followed the evidence," Juwu said modestly. Admiral Kyung-ho joined their small circle. The war had cost him an arm, now replaced with a prosthetic designed by human medical technology. "Evidence many of us refuse to see," he added. "Pride can be a dangerous thing." Taehyun gestured for Ambassador Jan to join them. When she did, he addressed her formally. The new Galactic Charter is ready for signing. Humanity will have its rightful place at the table. Not as legends, Giant said, but as friends. From the edge of the garden, Captain Sungo and Lieutenant Yunji watched the proceedings. Their roles during the war had evolved into something more personal. Now they led the joint military training program, preparing the next generation of defenders. "Do you think they'll return?" Yunji asked. "The void." Sungo considered before answering. "Perhaps, but we'll be ready if they do, together." Above them, the sky was filled with ships, human and Concordium designs, now joined by new vessels built with shared technology. Workers were completing the final sections of the orbital defense platform, a marvel of engineering that incorporated the best aspects of both civilizations. In classrooms across New Serenity, children learned the true history of humanity, not as myths or legends, but as a species with their own triumphs and failures. The ancient monoliths, once mysterious relics, were now understood as the silent guardians they had always been. As the ceremony concluded, Ambassador Jian moved to the podium to address the gathered representatives. "Today we remember those we lost," she began. "But we also celebrate what we found, each other. For centuries, humanity lived in the shadows of your myths. You spoke of us as giants, as gods, as monsters. The truth, as always, is both simpler and more complex. We are neither legends nor saviors. We are simply travelers on the same cosmic journey, now walking the path together." The silence that followed her words was broken by young Minho, who had returned to his parents but called out one simple question. "Will you tell us stories of Earth?" Jian smiled. "We have many to share, and we look forward to hearing yours in return." As the sun set over New Serenity, the light caught the memorial's crystal surface, projecting the names of the fallen across the garden. Human and Concordium alike stood together, no longer separated by myth or misunderstanding, but united by shared sacrifice and hope for the future.